Hey, and welcome to a very special episode of PPC Town Hall. We're in the Optmyzr living room at the office, and we brought together a number of experts who have some thoughts about what Google might or may not announce tomorrow. We have Kirk Williams, Brooke Osmundson, Gil Gildner, and Navah Hopkins. So, welcome. Navah, tell us quickly what you do.
So I'm the evangelist over at Optmyzr. I get to sit with the product team, the marketing team, the CS team, the sales team, and listen to all the amazing things that our customers want, and then bring that insight externally and listen to all the amazing things going on externally and bring that back into the product.
Gil?
I am the co-founder of Disco Sloth, small PPC agency, and we work with kind of small to mid-sized brands, mostly e-commerce. We do a lot of shopping and PMax and stuff like that. A little bit of text and just standard search advertising.
Great. Brooke?
I'm Brooke Osmundson. I'm the director of growth marketing at a company called Smith Micro Software. So I'm really focused in like the family safety industry, especially with the tech space. We do a lot of app advertising, a lot of social and just demand generation in general. And then from that, because we're in the tech space and in family safety, I focus a lot on the privacy aspect of everything too. So I'm very curious to see what's going to come out from that tomorrow.
Sure.
I'm Kirk. I own Zeta. We're a paid search agency. We focus primarily on D2C, actually very similar to Mr. Gildner here. Yeah, we've gotten to know each other a bit because we have very similar philosophies. Just small agency, focused primarily on Google and Microsoft and e-commerce and do the thing. Yeah, merchant center, shopping ads, all the above.
All right, so let's jump into some of the predictions for tomorrow. Let's talk about PMax. Do we think we're going to see more controls?
So one thing that the wonderful Kirk Williams of Shadow Marketing, he has one of the best blog posts on this. And I'm so impressed with you that you have it ranked for like how to do the exclusions for PMax. I would be extremely impressed if they finally built in a programmatic way to actually add those exclusions. I'm really curious to hear your perspective on this because it feels like something that they should do, and like we all collectively know that they allow us to do it, but it's not necessarily something that like they've leaned into manual human action there where they could have done programmatic.
Yeah, to me, automation, the challenge of this is you're always, obviously, artificial intelligence or machine learning or that, especially what Google's doing with PMax, it's very automated. There's some level where it works best because people aren't touching it. And the flip side of that is it's not an entirely closed, perfect system, which means you do need humans to engage with it and give it feedback and help it guide it. To me, those are always like going at each other with fully automated systems like PMax. And I'm really hopeful that this GML will be Google increasing our ability to give a little bit more of communicating feedback levers of maybe things, goals and that sort of thing, where they don't really have access to their data. Because in that sense, it's not the machine's fault. It doesn't have access to that data because of whatever reason there is on client side for us or that, then we can't optimize to that. So if we have ways to do it, one of those would be like, let's say, native keyword, additional ways to communicate native keywords, placements, that sort of thing. There are already ways to do some of those exclusions. Some of them are clunky. It would just be nice to have it streamlined. So yeah, hopefully, I think Julie McKinney on Twitter has talked a lot about that, of just what are ways collaboratively that Google can more and more ingest our feedback into their system to help their automated system. And yeah, I'd love for this GML to really show some changes along that.
And I'm going to go a little bit counter on that. I think they're not going to go necessarily give us more negative keywords because that's a revenue reduction scheme to a large degree.
Yeah.
But I think where they actually have a huge opportunity to grow is in collecting more first-party data.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about over the past couple of years, like new customer acquisition, tell us who your customers are, therefore we can exclude them from being targeted again. Or the more that we know how far somebody went down a shopping basket, we can do remarketing to them. And make that better, right? And so I think in the more privacy-centric world, they're probably going to come at us with a couple of new options for if you give us these pieces of data, then to your point, the machine can really go after what it is you care about. But it's not in terms of reducing the market. It's in terms of, hey, now we see all of these things that we didn't understand about your business before, where we can actually make more money for Google.
Gil, what do you think?
I would be surprised if they don't talk about PMax and AI in general. I think that's going to be 95% of Google like. I'm trying to not be too excited about the possibilities, which are endless. Which would
Well,
be
what are some of the things you're excited about?
excited about?
That could be.
I think,
should be.
I think
announced.
they would make exact match great again.
Okay.
I don't think that's happening. I think I would actually, in seriousness, would love Google Merchant Center next and PMax and to be better integrated into Shopify natively and pull in a lot more real data for better attribution.
Especially new customer based.
Yes.
Especially new customer based. E-commerce clients want that desperately.
What you were saying reminded me of that, which is it's instead of using third-party attribution tools, which a lot of people are having to hack in, I would just love for PMax to just integrate more natively better with Shopify specifically or BigCommerce or whatever, and just pull in, yes, clients want new customer acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
And PMax has that weird black box where you don't really know, is it cannibalizing my brand? What is it doing out there? And if they have something better there just to flow that whole ecosystem together better, I would be really excited.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think it'll be interesting to see how much the focus is on PMax for lead gen versus PMax for e-commerce.
Mm-hmm.
One of the main frustrations that a lot of folks have faced with PMax is that it is mandatory for e-commerce, and granted, standard shopping is still a thing. You absolutely still should leverage that. But lead gen typically struggles. And I think one of the reasons why it struggles is that the conversion thresholds for PMax are a struggle. And combine that with the attribution models that they're thinking about, helping with actual sale value and lifetime value of a customer, and feeding that information in. I think that's the problem to tackle, and that's what I'm excited to hear about. There were a couple of interesting models teased earlier this year around Meridian, and also I forget the names of them. It's the 7-day and the 14-day attribution models for sales for e-commerce, and then also for long sales cycle e-commerce, or not e-commerce, lead gen. But that's what I'm really excited about, is how will Google improve the tools for PMax for lead gen to enable advertisers to trust fall into that black box. Because I totally agree with you. It's not perfect. It shouldn't ever be perfect. They've made some concessions, but there's still some things to do.
Have you been seeing the news reports? It sounds like Google is in talks to buy HubSpot or whatever.
I want to get.
Yeah.
I'm so upset. Okay, so HubSpot, real story, has an ad management product, and it's passable. They have a landing page solution. It's passable. They have a CRM system. It's passable. And what I'm really concerned about, and this is just me and my opinions of HubSpot, just me and my opinion, I'm really concerned that if Google and HubSpot do actually join forces, they'll have the semblance of that first-party data integration and like that perfect harmony without actually delivering on it, and without delivering on it for the people that need it. Like, it would be yet another instance where enterprise wins and the little guy is left behind, because the average little guy is not affording HubSpot. The average little guy is not going to be able to power that. So it'll just...
That's always the interesting dichotomy at these events, is that they go on stage and they speak about it's advertising that works for everyone. But really the people in the room are the big spenders.
Yeah.
Those are the cool products. And so I think with HubSpot, it makes sense because you have big spenders, mid-level spenders who today struggle with bringing in that actual sales data, right? If you're lead gen, you're not communicating what's an actual sale, like the system's not working as well. So for Google, it makes total sense to spend billions of dollars to buy that, because it's going to get those advertisers to double down.
My core concern, and this comes from paying attention to the SEOs in the room, is that if it goes down the way that Reddit went down, where Reddit ended up taking over the search result page, it seems like, this is not disclosed, but it seems like they're pushing traffic for then Reddit to create their own search ad solution, that it might not have the integrity that it could have. So that's my main concern around it, is that it's not that the idea itself is bad. It's just, why do they need to have the acquisition versus the integration? Because they have the integration with Salesforce. They have the integration with all these other things.
They have the integration with HubSpot. It's just nobody can figure out. And even like Salesforce, people can't figure out how to do it. It's not easy. And so the question is, can you make it easier by buying the company? I don't think that's necessarily true, but that might be the thinking.
I used to... Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I used to hate HubSpot, but it's gotten really a lot better in the past couple of years. I actually would like Google to buy it because then they just make it free for everyone.
Yeah, I like that.
And
Well, they
and
make it
then,
free
like,
for sure.
and just have a native integration straight into Google Ads that
Mhm.
I just think that would solve a lot of lead gen problems that Google has right now.
So now, like, I'm just putting this all together. So going on a separate tangent though, when they announced that they're delaying third-party deprecation, do we feel that this has something to do with if they do buy HubSpot? So you made a good point, like instead of them not necessarily delivering on what they said, is it easier to buy a company and kind of have that first party integration?
Yeah, it suddenly becomes first party data.
Exactly. And so
Serious.
I didn't even think about that until you just brought that up.
And I think that's going to be a big theme tomorrow is first-party data
Mhm.
and the context of the third-party cookie going away eventually. I think you had a good tweet about that, right? Which is going to happen first? The third-party cookie deprecation,
I was just
Right.
having funny.
or TikTok.
Because
Yeah.
everything
So-
keeps getting, everything keeps getting pushed back.
Mike
Yeah.
Ryan had a great image tweet about that. I can't remember what it was, but it just made me laugh.
I'd be interested to see if the things that were announced at Upfront last week end up getting repeated tomorrow, or for Google Marketing Live, or whether there's an assumption that we all heard it already or that we all reviewed it already with YouTube campaigns and kind of the new formats there.
So there's always a YouTube segment, so for
Yeah.
sure we're going to talk about it again because I think most people watching probably haven't heard these updates yet.
But what's interesting when we're talking about Performance Max, the mechanics of that, I think one of the main points of friction is the video piece and how hard it is to create that really beautiful, amazing video. But where Google, I think, has room to grow and where I'm actually excited for the AI stuff is AI-powered video.
Yeah.
I think
Yep.
that's going to be some part of an announcement.
Yeah, I
can
They've
see.
already made huge strides from an AI standpoint with the conversational, even just like your own text ads and the assets that it's grabbing. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And even just playing with that, I have little doubt that they won't announce something. My guess is they're on like YouTube Shorts. Like they'll
Yeah.
have the ability to create those types of video
Mhm.
content from whatever inputs that they decide to let you put in.
And so my hope when it comes to video and generative AI is that they actually have really thought about the interfaces to have a conversation with the assistant as opposed to a button that says, okay, here's my YouTube clip, just go and do something and like fingers crossed it's good. And because I think that's really the reason why it hasn't worked for many people is it just does something and it's slightly off, but you have no
you
way
can't
to
give
fix
it
it.
feedback, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have to go to a third-party tool, and then you have to redo it, and now it's all this friction, and then you don't get to it because we're all busy. But so but I do think if you have a generative assistant that you have a conversation with, you teach it your brand, you teach it your style, and you're like, oh, that was a good first attempt, but can you change it like this and that? Like if
Because
that's
taking
built
that,
in,
taking
that'll
that
work.
feedback. I've done that even just with headlines, descriptions, all of the different assets, and I think that it'll give you 5 or 6 different options, and it's going to learn what you are picking and then what you aren't picking too. So even by not picking something, I think it's providing, oh, this is not right for them, or maybe I'll tweak this a little bit next time. So I think something will come out around the conversational AI piece from an ad creative standpoint, whether it's just for Shorts or...
Yeah, I think it'll be all of those for sure.
Have you guys had the chance to play with the conversational campaign creation and the ad creative?
Mhm.
I'm really curious if we can all weigh in on whether we currently love it and do we expect any improvements there? Do we currently dislike it? Or are we expecting improvements to make us love it?
Gil.
It does nothing for me.
Yeah.
It just, I could see it being really useful for a small business doing their own ads. It'd be perfect because they don't know how the average owner of a clothes boutique doesn't know even how many characters need to be in a headline. So that could be really useful if you know nothing about Google Ads. But for us, we just don't need it. It doesn't do anything for
Yeah,
us.
and I would argue that I do get stuck after 12 headlines. I'm like, I need
No,
3
that
more.
is true. But for that, we use ChatGPT or Grok
Yeah.
or something like that. And
Right, but that's where I think, and I'm really hoping again
Yeah.
that it's integrated, right? Because every time you
Yeah.
have to step out of platform and do
True.
something,
I have not really been impressed with any of the actual text that's
Mhm.
generated because I can go over to Grok in fun mode
Mhm.
and it gives me like an actual funny, different, like more human twist.
Right.
So they'd really have to improve it for it to ever be useful for me.
I would agree. I've played around with it from headlines, descriptions. I've had some success actually in description lines, which, again, the importance of those, most people are looking at headlines, but I'll start with something. And to Fred, your point is sometimes you get so burnt out on doing your own ad copy, you need something. What was interesting when I was playing around with it is I specifically gave feedback on the headlines, and I said I need more call to actions. And what they were giving me is very generic. And so I tested it, and I added my own headlines, which I thought were a bit more interesting. And my ad strength was average. And then I tried deleting everything, and then I put all of the more generic ones that they had suggested. My ad strength went up to excellent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like sacrificing that. It's like there still needs that human component because you know your customers better. And if it's a new advertiser using it for the first time, my fear is that you're going to have a lot of bland ads out there for somebody who's just fully trusting that system, and they may not see the success that they want to right away.
One prediction I have is that we are going to get a little bit of a poke as an industry of what is ad strength and why to care, and what is quality score and why to care, and what are all these, what is Optiscore or optimization score and why do we care? Because that was a big discussion point for a lot of us, and good questions about does it matter, does it not? I think what you said about it being generic is really interesting, because I think you also said that you do a lot of app ads. And so I'm wondering if the amount of data that Google has to understand what a good ad is for apps is so much less, because the amount of people using app ads is going to be less than other types of ad formats. So their ability to understand creative may be impeded.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting though too, because with app ads though, you can be shown around almost the entire Google ecosystem. You can be shown on search, within the Google Play Store, on the display network, within YouTube. So to me, it mimics a Performance Max ad, except even less targeting, if you can believe that. And so it's still using all of those different assets that you would maybe put in for any one of those types of campaigns. So it's got to be learning from something. So my guess is an interchanging of which assets you're putting in what type of campaign.
Totally.
You mentioned like bland headlines, and that makes me wonder, what is it learning from? Is it learning from just the most common headline, buy now?
Because right, shop belts and accessories.
That's what it will generate. It will shop something or generate something as generic and just blah as that. So it's like, where is it learning? Is that really the best performing headline?
Right.
And again, it's pulling in two directions, right? I think with PMax, it's like, hey, just tell us what you're doing and we got it from here. You don't even need to make two PMax campaigns, honestly. But that's really where they're coming from. Like for the average, someone who's selling belts out of a small store, that should be the solution. But for us, we're like, well, there's belts for men and women and different styles of belts. And so we want to go to that next level. But you're right, the system has maybe learned something too generic, and it isn't helpful to us as much as it could be.
I don't know that Google would go out and say, make one PMax campaign. I actually think that they would be on the side of make multiple PMax campaigns and do search campaigns with Broadmatch, because Broadmatch and PMax are the power couple, which we're definitely going to hear again. But before we go down that track, Kirk, do you want to chime in on conversational campaigns?
Not much more than what everyone has said. It is interesting to me. You can never trust everything you read on social media, but I literally just saw this post by a Google engineer who just quit a month ago or so. You might have seen that as well, and basically where he said, hey, Google's in a panic basically to get AI going faster than everyone else, which might be, I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's how literally all of them could be described. One of those, like, they're all competing against each other and like frenzying each other. Yeah. So that might be part of why right now it's just not quite as good, as they're just trying to roll it out so they can keep saying, hey, there's AI and that will continue to improve. That's probably one thing, is I think it's just obviously going to improve as we go about it. But another thing with the whole AI experience is, I think this is actually a reflection on, I don't know if this is the evolution of where the paid search marketer needs to go or what that would be, but for the most part, machine learning, and those are only going to be as good as the inputs that we give it.
Yes.
And especially those inputs in something like Google Ads are, they're pulling that especially from like your website and the other information, right? And so in some ways, I think that what someone really needs to think through for Google's machine learning and all these others to do better would be to really make sure that they're doing a great job with their like website and making things like their call to action clear, and just like maybe taking a better look at that. And I wonder if over the last years, like I think of e-commerce businesses and that, especially where we do a lot of our work, there's just like the average or lower than the average in terms of content level is just what's become expected, because you're just trying to get something live so someone buys your product, right? And so maybe that's part of it, is maybe going through and updating everything, making sure that our title, our SEO, metadata, and all that, like all of that stuff is just really good. Maybe that'll help, I think.
But I think that there's something else in there too. And I'm really glad you brought up the point about the average and the average creative. I think most PPC marketers, or stereotypical ones, are afraid of video. And when we think about PMax and it's Google basically empowering us to face our fears and have some degree of video in our campaigns, because they saw that video is doing well. People are consuming more and more video. The problem is, and we were talking about this offline, is that the YouTube algorithm is not equal to the TikTok algorithm. It's not equal to the Instagram algorithm. It's not equal to the Snap algorithm in terms of the video content. And so one thing I'm actually hoping to hear is, what are some of the ways that Google is going to empower a smarter video algorithm for both paid and organic, but then also the tools available to help us create. And we talked a little bit about the AI pieces, but I'm also actually interested in that ad strength mechanic. I don't actually feel like we get a good ad strength mechanic for video. Like, it's there for text, it's there for display, but for video, just...
Well, I'm excited to see if and what they bring out for any sort of AI creative for videos. But I'm also in an industry where there's a lot of brand regulations and legal requirements. And so that is something that we face as, this would be great, but like, how do we take what Google is creating or any sort of AI tool and then having to take that back to make sure that there's brand approvals, legal approvals, like there's always going to be a gap there too. So I'd be very interested to see, because the brands that I work with, they ask you like, oh, what you submitted, is this AI generated content? And you can say yes or no, but like, how easy would that be to like share with me? Like, I go way in the weeds with this, but it's great in theory. For me, being able to actually use it is a whole different story.
Totally.
Yeah, and that's again where I hope that the workflows that they announce are improved, and it's not like one-shot AI generation of something, but it actually helps you get it through the client approval process and tweak that one thing that just wasn't exactly right. Because the frustration, I think, over past years is that they announce something, but it always leaves us wanting that little bit more, and it's just not quite there yet. And I think we're going to see a lot of announcements tomorrow that are just vaporware. Going to be vaporware for a couple of years first, but hopefully get us excited. And you were saying like Google's struggling internally. Things are on fire because they're not a leader in AI. And for me, there it's interesting because you look at, they need to have AI within the ads product, and we'll find let's just bake it in, or otherwise people use ChatGPT and that might have better headlines.
Yeah.
But what I think they're really afraid is, are people going to start doing their searches on ChatGPT? Because then the game that we're all playing is like completely changed.
Candidly, I put together the itinerary and the planning for my 10-year anniversary trip to Iceland. I put in a 79-page guidebook into GPT-4 combined with the reservations that I already have. And within 20 minutes, I had, with Google Map directions, driving time, and here's a suggested where to eat, here's suggested what to do in the morning, what to do in the evening, all these things that Google was not going to be able to help me. And it's not Google's fault. Iceland happens to be really bad at websites, so the information that it would be able to ingest is less. So it's interesting that, and Kirk, you've made this point a lot, of it would be great if we could teach the platform and teach the AI. That would be the gift of all gifts from Google Marketing Live, and I doubt that we'll get to hear it, is being able to actually teach the system and truly give it that feedback.
Well, teach it, and I think the other thing that Google needs to announce, and I don't know if they will tomorrow, but they need to announce that there is a way for the agent to act on your behalf, right? So we've all grown up in the place where we click on an ad, we go and do something, and then we get something. I know, Kirk, you're immensely frustrated by the accept all cookies banner. I hate those things too. I think there's so many clicks you
I
need to
accept
do.
them for all time.
Yes,
everywhere.
exactly. Please.
Have my data.
I just want
Give
to
it
buy,
to you.
I just want to buy this thing. Like, why do I have to click so many things? But no, I think that ultimately we're seeing AI buttons, we're seeing AI glasses, we're seeing ways where we don't have to go and click and fill out forms. And I think Google needs to announce that there's some sort of agent sort of integration so that our advertisers can say, hey, listen, I'm DoorDash. If you want to order from me, like use Google Search Generative Assistant. And don't make people click. Just understand what I like to eat. And you had a conversation with me, like place that order, have it at my door for dinner tonight. I think that would be a big announcement that they need to make if they want to keep the ad system relevant.
I will say that we would be doing a disservice to predictions if we didn't dive deep into e-commerce predictions, given who's at the table. Do you guys want to chime in on e-commerce predictions? That
I think Google Merchant Center Next is going to have a role. I think they're going to make it, I think they're going to transition it in the next 12 to 18 months where they're killing off Classic and they're going to move to Next. Before they do that, so I think this is what they're announcing tomorrow, they're going to have supplemental feed and feed rule support. So I wouldn't be surprised if they communicate that. And then I'm also expecting an announcement in Next of feed optimization. I think they're going to start using AI-generated feed optimization of saying, here's the data you give, and then here's some optimization. Although we'll see with that, because the flip side of that is they're already doing that automatically. As an example, they're optimized titles.
Yeah.
So there might be some level where it's not going to be a tool. So maybe what they'll announce is, I just ramble here and make stuff up. Like maybe what they'll announce is they're just doing that more, not just in titles. They're just they're just changing up your feed.
What about the flip side of it? What about feedless?
Yeah, feedless has been around.
But any like evolution to that, or
I mean that they actually implement what they've said they will more.
Exactly. Finally comes true.
Yeah, to me, feedless is something they've talked about, and I think they announced it more officially last GML and stuff like that. So maybe they'll say it again. But in some ways, it's just. And to me, and here's a little bit of this is where we have to have supplemental feed rule. We have to have some way to edit the feed for something like feedless, because that again also goes back to the accuracy of your own site and your own data, right? So I love the concept of feedless in a perfect world. I would love to have just magic, like our client sites, Shopify, whatever, all the structured markup is in there. It just gets magically into Google. There's got to be a way for us to edit that stuff, because that stuff, it breaks all the time. Google's always pulling the wrong price or whatever off the page, even when you have structured markup implemented. So again, like I'm not opposed to AI even for stuff like that, but there has to be a way for us to go and edit it and say, this was wrong, here's the correct whatever it might be.
Last year's GML, one of my favorite announcements was Next, because even though it's been slow in the implementation, because I've hated feeds for so long. I just think it's a hacky way. You don't need more middlemen in between your store and that. So the idea of feedless is fantastic. It's coming. One thing I was really pleasantly surprised about in the years since last GML is how much data and reports have gone into Merchant Center, the new Merchant Center Next. A lot have moved over, and there's some new, really interesting kind of competitor insights type stuff and like within that, and they never announced that, it just appeared. So I've been pleasantly surprised. I'm almost positive they're just going to keep on shifting over. We can do more in Next now than we can in Google Ads for some things.
Yeah,
it's nice.
You brought up an interesting point that I think it would actually be interesting for us to chat about, is how products get announced and how things get announced. Lately, it seems like we just have to follow API documentation and like any new help articles versus official product announcements. I, for one, find it fun, but not terribly useful and productive to have to go hunting for product updates. And, oh, this thing just changed. That's not great. So I would love it if they would announce some sort of unification to their product updates. And we're like, this is coming in product, versus having to rely on a help article. But what do you guys think?
I would love if that came to be true, but I don't think tomorrow's stage is where they're gonna make a big deal about that.
Do you remember when Microsoft did that? They don't anymore, I don't think, right? But they had a forum for advertisers.
That
and
forum
you
is
could
still
even-
active, and you can vote.
You can vote and stuff?
Yeah, it's still active.
I
So,
did not know.
all right, so fun fact.
That's amazing concept.
Fun fact, because this is an Optmyzr prediction round. Our amazing partner manager over at Microsoft shared their feedback form specifically looking at audience placements and audience placement exclusions and targeting because of the study that we'll be putting out shortly. And so if Google wants to borrow from Microsoft instead of the other way around, bring back forums and let us upvote things, because Microsoft is doing that, and it's a really useful, valuable way to embody the voice of the customer and get us to keep spending money.
I remember, I certainly was not the first one or the only one to say this, but I think I was the one who had the post about adding LinkedIn audiences. And I remember it was like 2 or 3 years or whatever it was. And when they finally had added it and they marked it complete, I was like, yeah, that was so awesome. Thank you, Microsoft.
So this is actually an interesting way to look at what we would be super surprised to hear about. And given who's in the room, the in-house and agency balance, and then obviously Fred and I being Optmyzr and software, what would we expect to hear and what would we not expect to hear in regards to tools for our respective domains?
I'm just going to go ahead and say there's not going to be anything.
Not going to be.
There's usually not a whole lot for B2B advertisers, so I'm not expecting anything there. But even just the last few GMLs is just like whatever they are announcing. Surprisingly, I've been able to find a way, like, how could this work for both a B2C or a B2B advertiser, which is nice. I know that every once in a while they'll focus on very specific verticals that are obviously B2C, but I wouldn't expect anything B2B realm or like local or even vertical specific. That's going to be my take, because usually there is something, but maybe I don't think there will be this year.
I wonder if they'll add more services to LSAs.
They for sure will, but what's interesting is, going back to the point earlier about who are the products for and what kind of spend levels do you have to bring. It's funny that it never feels like there's anything for B2B, but that's the perfect use case for it, because they'll have the spend, or like they'll have those interesting.
But that's where we talked about HubSpot, right? And I think that would be a big investment for B2B, and that is a significant market opportunity. And we've talked to Google about this, where they feel like it is multi-billions of dollars per year being spent without clear goals for the machine learning system to know what to do with. And if they had a HubSpot integration or something like it, I think that is a big deal for that space.
But they're not going to be able to do anything until people feel comfortable saying, I want this target ROAS or I want this target CPA. I think that there's a fundamental fear.
Well, I think and this is maybe the action to measurement, because I think we are certainly going into a world where we grew up knowing exactly this click led to, or this impression became this click, became this conversion, and this much money. That's going away to some degree. It's a little bit more generalized at this point. There's a lot of modeling that's happening. And so there is a level of discomfort that we all have to become okay with. And so I think part of tomorrow will be like, guys, it's okay. Machine learning and these models are pretty good at telling you where the value is coming from, and you don't need that click level information.
I would agree with that. Like I even take it a step back, like further back, and I like when you start actually asking the business level questions internally, or like you are an agency and you're asking your client questions, you know, a lot of the campaign goals are either based on a CPA or a ROAS. And when you start asking those questions, what I found is sometimes the business doesn't even know, or they're just making up an arbitrary number because they think that is a good thing. And so to your point is, if businesses aren't seeing the value, or they're expecting this, sometimes they're just not asking good enough questions in the beginning to actually give the proper inputs. Like, who's made the mistake of putting all of their target CPAs the same, brand versus non-brand, and they say Google doesn't work. We have to be better as marketers to like peel back at the beginning and asking those business level questions and making sure that they're validated too.
And then even then taking that back to the HubSpot example, if Google owned HubSpot, I was able to see, your setup doesn't have enough granularity, or there's something wrong with it. If you had done this, then even if we don't know the exact ROAS, we would have been directionally able to tell you something that's more valid for your business.
Especially for something that takes 6, 9, 12,
Yeah.
18 months. And obviously that's not necessarily like what Google has been great at, because or campaigns with very long sales cycles. And I think that would be a huge opportunity. I've worked with tons of B2B brands who you would think that they have a ton of spend with. I can only spend $2,000 a month, and right now getting any sort of results with that. So a lot of people I think are now starting small or smaller, and Google's going to have to prove somehow that it's worth them continuing to spend more and even ramping up from there.
I'll be interested to hear if folks feel like demand gen meets that need, because demand gen is very much about creating that top of funnel demand.
Mhm.
It's a very visual format, but it is in theory a cheaper path to that awareness that could feed into organic leads and sales or into branding campaigns. So I'll throw it out there. Do we want to talk about demand gen? Any things that we're expecting to hear on demand gen?
They're definitely going to expand that. I think I like demand gen.
Mhm.
I think it needs more surfaces and it needs to be expanded even more. But that's become something we test for every client that wants top of funnel. It's not paid social, but it's almost paid social, and it's I like it. I think it has potential. So I really hope they.
It's interesting that the way you put it is that the client wants top of funnel versus like they need top of funnel, so we run it.
Yeah.
Like it almost feels like we have to ask consent to give someone what they need.
So often that's because, right, they get very focused on the numbers, and it's just easy to want to pour money into what seems to be giving you that direct revenue. And that goes back to what you were saying earlier about potential Shopify integration, getting more insight into like new customers and incrementality in that. To me, that's so crucial for top of funnel. And that's always been something that Google and I think all of us have struggled to identify and to prove, is how do these campaigns work into the system. And you have very complex testing that is done by companies like House Analytics and that sort of thing to try to look into that and demonstrate it. But I think there might be opportunity there. But I think Google needs to try to help with that a little bit better as they're pushing demand gen. Otherwise, it's very easy for brand owners to look at it and say, hey, this isn't giving me the ROAS that I expected.
A common issue I hear people, like the advertisers, say about demand gen is I think they assume it's just using trash placements and junk, like just cramming it out into the corners of the internet. I don't think that's actually the case in a lot of ways, but the perception is that demand gen is just like this cheap catch-all that we just. I know it's different. People have a misconception.
Do you think there's going to be tools announced to make it more clear that it's not junk?
If that's possible, I would love that, but I don't know.
I wouldn't expect an announcement, but to that point, more transparency is always better. Like that still just baffles me when they want us to try all of these new campaigns or demand gen. Used to be discovery, and so it's like for us to go and explain to clients or brands like how this works and being upfront what you can and what you can't see. Why not give us the tools, transparency to be able to scale it and to optimize it so that way you can spend more down the road.
And Google is now under fire from really three directions, right? You have Amazon on e-commerce, you have all the social networks pulling away from demand gen, from the upper funnel, early customer journey, and then you have generative AI potentially taking away the search business. And so I think Google is really seeing some serious struggles that would make them much less valuable in a couple of years. And so I think we're going to see announcements about the value of their own platforms when it comes to demand gen and maybe some new surfaces that they have and how much shopping ads are actually competing against Amazon and how that's maybe better quality in some cases than marketplaces. And then I think we're going to see some announcement on SGE and like how do we keep people engaged with Google. And I think that also then maybe flows into local a little bit. How do we take Google devices and have more location sensitive awareness about who you are, what you want to do, and pushing towards some commerce or a new restaurant or a local experience that you hadn't had before.
I was smiling while you were talking because I think Google's going to grab that clip and play it in their next DOJ, like antitrust. They're like, see, Fred doesn't think we're a monopoly. He thinks that there's 3. Yeah. Oh, that was funny.
You were talking about this. I have a Pixel, and I keep, like, anytime I accidentally swipe up to the home, it'll say circle to search, and I haven't played with it yet. But I wonder if there's going to be anything that comes out around that. What does that look like? Like, you can, like, take a photo of something and you're circling it, and then it just, like, searches. I wonder, what does that look like what is Google going to start showing based on what people circle, and
As
how are they capturing
Fred
that?
takes
Capturing
What am I
intent.
looking at?
I just noticed it, like, last week on my phone, and
Yeah.
I probably, as a marketer, should be playing with it, but I haven't, and I'm just very curious on how that'll play into the ad space.
What's interesting is, what do we play with as marketers versus what do consumers play with? One of the reasons I broke down and finally set up a TikTok is a really good friend of mine did a presentation about how TikTok Shops was killing it for folks. And I'll be honest, the TikTok algorithm is pretty good. It's actually a very useful algorithm. But at the same time, what's also very interesting about TikTok is that whenever you create something, it's very easy, but you also get a copy of whatever you made to your phone or to your device. So you can then take that asset and put it anywhere else. So that's what I would be excited to hear about with Google, is that Google starts letting you take some of your assets, especially from a demand gen, and putting it to other spots where it has that watermark of it came from Google. I think that's going to be the real earmark.
That's interesting, because Microsoft basically said, hey, we have an import from Google button. And I think what you're suggesting is, hey, we should have an import from TikTok button for video, because they just do it better at some level. I think the algorithm point, and this was an offline discussion earlier, but that was super fascinating as well, because you go on Instagram and, hey, here's 20 more companies that do the thing that you were just searching for before. So it goes down these rabbit holes, whereas it seems like TikTok is more like understanding you as a person holistically, and a little bit of this, a little bit of that, whereas the Instagram, Facebook, maybe Google takes you down a little bit too narrow of a path. That's very in the moment, but doesn't get you to think about what is that next thing that you might actually want to think about.
And what's also interesting is purchasing behavior. I would love for Google to make more announcements about how they plan to talk about privacy first world and cohorts alongside that transactional intent and understanding when people are in market for things. I think that's going to be a very difficult road to toe. That, say, for example, I did my video of here are my 4 profiles and here's what they did. I don't think that'll be possible in 2-3 years with privacy first, the privacy first one.
So you had said it'd be great if Google allows us to essentially take that content. I'm thinking about YouTube Shorts or like those videos. If they're going to have some sort of AI creator, I don't think that they will, because if you think about it, they don't want you to take that content and put it on a TikTok or an Instagram. They want everything on Google. The more you're enveloped into the Google ecosystem, and especially from an attribution standpoint, we're talking about demand gen, it's going to be a lot easier to piece that whole purchasing journey together from anything within a Google ecosystem campaign versus doing demand gen, or I'm going to do paid social, TikTok or Snapchat, anything like that, and I have that headache today, and it's not pretty. So I have high hopes for that. I don't think that it would be, here, I'm going to give you this, and then you can go easily upload this.
Yeah, and I think we're also thinking a little bit the other way around, right? So if TikTok is the number one, make it easier to pull that into YouTube, pull it into ads, and leverage.
So an import feature, but not an export, maybe.
I wonder if they just take YouTube Shorts and just put it everywhere. Just make it way easier. Just to use their own TikTok. I'm
very curious, because didn't they just come out with something with Netflix? Was that just in the last 7 days or so?
I was just thinking of CTV. I'm just wondering if
there's got to be something coming out with that.
So it's very interesting. I was sitting next to a guy who is raising his Amazon spend from $3 to $4 million a year to $45 million, and he had nothing but bad things to say about the Netflix experience. And the specific things he said were, the reporting was not great. But the second is that the premiums that he was paying for Netflix versus the other placements is not especially lovely. So what I suspect will probably happen when it comes to the Google buyer because we're so conditioned to believe that visual content is lower quality and we're not prepared to pay premiums for those lower quality placements, I almost wonder if we'll accidentally budget too low or bid too low for those spots. And then we'll say that they don't perform because we didn't bid enough to be on them. Like I feel like we need more pricing information about these net new placements. That would be actually a really good announcement is what's the floor.
And I think there's also a lot of evolution happening in that, right? So the Netflix prices may have been high, the transparency wasn't good because these are nascent products and they are getting better. But I also think that's where it's curious, and I don't think Google's going to announce anything tomorrow because they would have done it at Upfront or they would have done it at I/O. But how Netflix and Hulu and Prime are owned by the others, and Google seems to keep doubling down on its YouTube, like YouTube subscriptions. And YouTube is big, but it is not as popular and is not the only game in town anymore when it comes to video. And so I'm wondering, is there, again, I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, but at some point they need to build those partnerships because Google is actually really good at ad infrastructure and the usability to buy it. If they want to give the reports, they know exactly how to do that faster than anyone in the world. But the question is, do they want to give it? So I think that's where you might see over the next couple of years some partnerships where somebody says, yeah, we'll monetize Netflix better. We'll have happier user advertisers if we actually let Google handle this.
Surprisingly, the keywords haven't come up hardly at all.
But that is that surprising?
Right. Last year
we all know what Google thinks.
Wonder, like, everything was so visual, like all these different examples. Like, they're saying it without saying it this time. I don't know.
Even like how things in PMax, they introduce search themes. And it's funny because as we talk to Googlers, like there's some level of search themes seem to be not really as helpful, again, if you have the rest of your inputs and stuff correct. So in some ways, it's not actually like doing that much if all the, like your product feed and your site and all that stuff.
So our data supported that, but the initial use of search themes, people who use search themes had lower performance than those that didn't. But what I suspect was the problem is that people didn't understand search themes when they initially came out. They did the exact same keywords as they had in their search campaigns, which would be counterintuitive, or they did super, super broad search themes that would be the equivalent of running a broad keyword. So I agree that search themes could improve, and our data does support that, but I'm a little nervous that human error is at risk. And it's interesting that search themes is a very human-centric lever in PMax, and that's one of the few levers that seems to not work as well. So it goes to that point of leave it alone.
I guess that was in PMax. You were talking more about search.
Oh, just in general, I think. So, I don't know. I think that they're called search themes. Are they going to be called search signals now? Same thing like with audiences. They're now just signals.
I mean, I think there is going to be some part of the announcement, which is not product, but it's just like evolution of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to make the point that keywords are no longer necessary because there's so many other ways to understand who that user is and what they want, and keywords are just a small portion of that.
Right.
And so I think in the past number of years, it was always like, hey, 20% of searches on Google are new in the last 90 days. That was basically your drinking game. Take a shot whenever Google mentions that. I think we're hopefully past that. I hope you don't hear it tomorrow. And I think they're going to start evolving that away from the number of searches that are new, but like how has generative helped us understand the conversation? Because I think another interesting aspect was that Google, for a very long time, understood your recent history of searches, and that would help target ads to, okay, if you're looking for Paris and you just looked for accommodations before, then they put that together and they understand you want a hotel in Paris. But now through generative conversations and having your assistant as your long-term assistant who understands all these preferences, you can understand far better and far fewer keywords what it is you need right now. And I think Google's going to start making arguments about how that's coming to fruition and why we need to focus on keywords much less.
The real question is, what is going to be Google's primary example business? Because in past years, it's been pizza places. Mm-hmm. It's been florists.
It's always small businesses, right?
It is. I'm going to go with shoes, sneakerheads.
Okay.
That's mine.
You say that because I got a ton of sneakers.
I'm throwing in for dog walkers because dogs, but also because there's a number of dogs correlating to Googlers. So that might be something interesting. But the other one that might potentially actually be interesting is lawyers. Because lawyers spend so much on PPC and they give us the hardest time with
I
creative.
know, but that's also the highest CPC
I know.
industry.
So-
Google is not going to talk about
Yeah.
like things being expensive.
I don't
But it
think
would be
Google would do that. They'd get sued.
They don't want the word lawyer,
No, that's just like,
lawsuit,
no.
attorney, judge. They're going to avoid all those words tomorrow.
All right, so there you have it, our predictions. Now, we might have been wrong on some of these, so that is why we're doing a couple more shorts that you're going to be able to see on our channel after the event, as well as next week, where we're going to come back and tell you what we feel about what Google just announced. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. Thanks for watching.